Good morning or afternoon, possibly evening for everyone. Whenever you're watching this, this is the teaching for our Simple Church meetings on August 30th, this coming Sunday. Sorry about the lateness of this. The last 2 days of the week turned out to be all kinds of things that were totally unexpected on my schedule. And so this is getting to you late. I hope to keep it short so you can get at least one look at this before we meet tomorrow. But I have given you some preparation through the verse and the overview video of Philippians through Facebook messaging this week. So trying to continue to communicate with all of you through that Facebook messaging in a variety of groups that I've assigned you to, but also on email. And this link will go out on email here as soon as I'm done and have it ready and posted on YouTube. So sorry about that. Not what I like to do, but I hope you all get oriented before we get together tomorrow. We'll be meeting 2 more weeks in our current situation with the simple churches as they are outside. We'll start transitioning to an inside plan in February, getting ready for the colder weather and getting protocols in place and just trying to make that normal as soon as we can, and the kids starting on school. So the fall schedule, as we typically do, is starting to dictate some changes, but again, within the situation that we're in. So we'll have some large gatherings alongside continuing our simple church gatherings, because the intimacy that allows, even when we're indoors and with masks on, like we have been outdoors, gives us opportunity to talk together and to pray together and to discuss things together. But we'll have the opportunity on occasion to be together in the larger groups, probably a minimum of once a month, if not more often. But we want to keep that balance of not only being able to be together and experience the larger group, but also continue to engage and grow in a personal way and keep everybody involved and active. Being a follower of Christ is not a spectator sport. It is it's being a fully active and engaged member of a family. And we want to continue to do everything we can in our situation to keep that emphasis in front of us. So appreciate your patience and commitment through all this, and continue to do so. We're making adjustments and adapting along the way. And we do that because we're followers of Jesus, and we will do whatever we need to do to keep his plan and his purpose central to our lives and working within it. Again, think about the early church and think about our brothers and sisters around the world who do not have the freedom, don't have the legality to meet as churches, and the adaptations and the situations, often the bad consequences that come from their willingness to follow Jesus no matter what. And we're not in that situation. However, we can learn from their adaptability and flexibility and commitment, even when it's not convenient, and especially when it's not, because that's always been the case with following Christ. And that's somewhat of the theme that I wanted to share with you today. So let me take you to sharing the screen and kind of recreating this as a Zoom meeting, so to speak, because we're all familiar with this. We will continue to have our Zoom at noon meeting on Sunday as well, so be mindful of that too. I may increase this box up here a little bit. I think you guys can see me in it as I speak. So just want to give you a full look at the screen, but also see me meeting there. So forgive the back and forth here and there. I run in technical things, and again, just want this to feel like not like I'm doing a show for you, but that we're interacting. And feel free when you see this on YouTube to post comments down below it, or to email me questions as you see this. Text them to me, email them to me, send them on Facebook message. I am glad to answer those things in the next video or in real time if I can. So want to encourage you all in that. I've entitled this one, We've been working through a series on the apostles' teaching over the summer, really sort of focusing. You've noticed almost all of my titles have the word new in it. And um, I've wanted to keep that as sort of the running theme, that we're part of new creation. We're part of the new thing that God is doing in the world, even though it's been around for a while. For us, it's new, and we need to engage in it in new and fresh ways, because the world is always changing around us, though some things in principle are always the same. But we are the ones who carry the good news and the newness, the freshness of life that's been brought into the world by Jesus, and continues through the work of his Spirit, and will one day be fully realized in his coming again. So that's what we're about here. And my hope has been that this has been something to challenge you personally in uh, this time of abnormality. Does not mean we have to be going backwards or staying the same in terms of our understanding and our growth and our maturity as believers. Quite the contrary. This could be a time of tremendous growth and strength. And my prayer and my hope is that it has been for most, if not all of you. But that's what you should desire too for yourself. We will be meeting on Wednesday night for a time of prayer. And I've really gotten to enjoy these times. Zoom has been a real gift, and it's something we'll be able to continue through the time. We can stay in the comfort of home without the extra energy and risk that it takes in getting out, but yet really have a good time of just having coffee together, really just sitting and chatting for an hour. And out of those relationships and in that social context, taking our concerns and our matters to the Lord in prayer. So I encourage you to be part of that, even if it's just for a brief time. Don't feel like you have to commit to the full hour. Everybody has different schedules, and with kids doing school, that things will be changing differently. But that period from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock on Wednesday, feel free just to check in on Zoom, especially in the first, say, 20 minutes from 7 to 7:30. That's usually a time where we're just chatting and catching up and what's new and what can we pray about. And then the last half hour is more of the focus time in prayer. So just jump in and say hi to us, and drop a line. Let us know how you're doing and what we can pray about. That is perfectly fine, and I encourage it greatly. And I think everyone will be appreciative of it. Send a text during the time, send a Facebook message to somebody. Just let us know you're out there during that 7 o'clock hour on Wednesday night, and it'll be greatly valued. I can assure you. We think about you anyway. We are on a pause or a rest time, actually, here at the end of August on our Thursday night video studies. So that's not going to be happening again, and starting up on the night of Thursday night, September the 10th, where we'll start into the next series, which is spiritual beings. We've looked at 20 themes that run throughout the entire scriptures, with Jesus as the central feature of that, as God's history, or the history of all histories, the story of all stories, as we've been calling it. But we'll look at these characters that are in the background and working in the story through the spiritual being series that the Bible Project has put together. So I encourage you to, again, you don't have to have been part of it before. Jump in and join us for that. It's watching the video and reading a few things, gathering your thoughts, and then having a conversation online about that. It's just another great learning tool that I think we're mastering well. And so I appreciate that. And again, we're just praying for safety, and remember our role in just being lights in the midst of this very, very difficult and challenging time. We don't know if it's going to get better or worse. That will be what it will be, but we'll do our part, and we'll continue to do our part. As you see in the passage today, and it has a lot of challenge to us as individuals and as a community in terms of our life in the world right now, no matter what those circumstances are. And again, they are widely varied around the world. We have looked at the apostles' teaching, and I've summarized it week in and week out in the messages that I've been bringing and the discussions we've been having. Um, this is all part of the building blocks of how Jesus is building his church. And each one of us are part of those building blocks. We are living stones. We are to be a something greater than the sum of its parts. So as we come together as individuals and as families, we are something not only for God and his purposes in the world, but for the world itself. And for one another, that we can't be as individuals. And this is part of Christ's plan, his central plan to build his church. And I've listed those things. That one, some of the key aspects of the apostles' teaching, we are to put off our old self and put on the new. We have a new life of virtues that is set before us to pursue in partnership with the Spirit. It's not all Spirit, it's not all us, it's a partnership. We have responsibilities in that. Our unity and ability to act together is a matter of the renewing of our individual minds. We are each responsible for renewing our minds, and so in that way being transformed by the Spirit in order to be really brought into the church that Christ is building. Our life focus is to be taken up into that of building Jesus's church and others in it. We are not hidden this for ourselves. It's never about what we get out of it. It's about what we bring to things. That's the Jesus pattern. And that's the pattern that we all need to have and want and desire for our lives. How can we contribute to the work that God is doing, and particularly how he's doing that in others? That's the pattern that Jesus left with us. See it echoed again in the passage today. Our individual lives as followers of Jesus are taken up into Christ's plan to build one new global family in local places. We have a strong identity now as part of a global family that has local expression, and that's by design. And that's not an accident. That's not just something we're doing because we don't know what to do until Jesus comes. It's central to Christ's plan, and it needs to be central to our lives then as well. Our lives are taken up into that history. We simply must see everything as part of one plan, build our faith and life upon it, and connect everything to Jesus. Everything. Everything is going to be summed up in Jesus. Everything finds their beginning and their end in Jesus. And we need to see every part of our lives in light of that. That's the standard by which our lives are going to be measured, and which we're going to understand how fruitful and faithful and effective we've been, is how much does it connect things to Jesus in our own lives, and for the lives of people around us, and for the work and the things that God has given us to do. And then lastly, over 2 weeks, I was taking you through just some kind of technical things through the Bible Project videos on the historical context of the apostles' letters and the literary context, which we looked at over the couple weeks. And I summarized that in this way, in saying that we need to engage with the apostles' teaching in the historical and literary situation in which it was given to gain wisdom as Jesus's followers today. We depend upon these documents, and how we engage them and understand them is directly related to our maturity and our ability to function as lights shining in a dark world today. You can't get there any other way. That's why the scriptures are central to what we do, in particular these writings of the apostles, because they are directly related to our age. That is where we find ourselves in the unfolding drama of God, which began with creation, led to the fall, the story of Israel, the story of Jesus as the fulfillment of Israel's story, and that which set in motion the plan for the church. And we live in that time, and these writings came at the beginning of that time, which is also our time. We live in that era. That's why it's so important that we know and understand where these documents came from, how they came about, and why they're there, and how to put them to work in our lives today. They are the standard by which we'll be judged in the fruitfulness and effectiveness of our lives in terms of contributing to Christ's plan, because this is where the plan is contained, particularly in the writings of Paul, which are numerous, and which again, I think next week I'll take you into a passage that once again reinforces how and why we should see Paul and his ministry in light of what we're called to today, why we have so many of his letters in one place. We'll see that in Ephesians chapter 3. Passage that many of you are familiar with, but it's good to reinforce what we're doing right now. again, this is part of the foundation that we started back in this series in the spring on Ephesians 4:1-16, where it's really a summary of what God is doing in terms of building this new body, and each one of us has to think about our own lives as strategic within that. That's what God is doing, and so we are all need to be as early as we can in our following after Jesus to say, what am I doing with my life? Am I doing my own thing? Or in following Jesus and being his loyal follower, am I working alongside with him and others to build what God is doing in the world? That's really the calling that we have. Not just to be good individual Christians. That's a great thing, but that's part of a larger plan and a larger purpose. That's what we're all about. And so that's a means to that greater end. We need to have that clear. So again, as we look at the apostles' teaching here, and this was the summary from the New Testament video that the Bible Project guys have done. I draw a lot on this because it's just a great medium that you can look at each and every week, and it's just so full of good, challenging ideas, but just a great tool that I hope you give yourself to it and bring questions about it and bring your thoughts and reflections about it. Don't keep those to yourself. Bring them to your simple churches, and let's have conversations around them, because this is how we grow, and this is how we focus our energies and our attention around Christ and his plan. But you can think about the letters as the testimony of the apostles that speak a divine word of hope. They also retell the story of Jesus and the Spirit and points to history's goal in a renewed creation. That's where it's all going. Not a disembodied existence forever in heaven, but a resurrected life that we will all share in the new heaven and the new earth when Jesus comes and restores all things. So that's the situational, general situational context for the apostles' letters. And then we see in the specifics about the letters we have from Paul and James and Jude, Hebrews, an unknown author, Peter and John, how the good news about Jesus reshapes every part of our lives and then invites us into the biblical story. Just think about those two things. Our own lives being reshaped, and then together and as individuals, how we are part of what God is now doing. That fivefold drama that I talked about, creation, fall, the story of Israel, the story of Jesus, and the story now of new creation, which began with the resurrection of Jesus, and will end with our resurrection and our reigning with him forever in a completely renewed world, heaven and earth coming together. So some of the contrast of the Old Testament into the New that you see there in the bottom. So the Old Testament presents the backstory, and the New Testament is the response. And on that basis, we live forward into the future that's yet to come. Let me go down for the sake of time here, just to take you to an overview of the Philippian letter. You see that in this graphic that comes out of the video that the apostle, the Bible Project did. And again, what you have here in these posters that they have done and the videos that they produce, you're looking at the historical context, which is usually some of this stuff that you see up here, and then the literary design, the literary context. So you can see how they've organized the pattern. Paul uses a pattern here, and this one tends to be a pattern in each of these passages, chapter 1, 1-11, 1:12-26, and so on, that seem to be wrapped around this central message of Jesus, which is captured in this poem about Jesus that Paul has had in his collection and has put here at the center to challenge the Philippians, in this case, to be not only united, but be also holy. And the pattern of Jesus, which is captured in this poem in 2:6-11, is the means of getting there. You need to be like Jesus. Timothy's been like Jesus. Epaphroditus, who you sent and who got sick and almost died, has been like Jesus. I'm trying to be like Jesus. And you guys have a problem here in your midst because there's a conflict or a struggle that we see in chapter 4 going on. It says, this is how you solve that problem. You all need to get back to focusing on Jesus and continue to do that. That will bring about the unity and the holiness that makes you God's unique people for the world. You are his colony in the world, or one of his colonies in the world, and your job is to bring his culture down into earth, to be an example of what it looks like when his will is done on earth as in heaven, in as much as the Spirit gives you power to do that. And so that's the idea of true citizenship that he mentions in chapter 3. So just a quick overview of the Philippian letter, and see that video if you want. One of the videos, well, please watch the video if you haven't. What is the therefore in this passage? How does it flow out of the previous section into 11? And what we have here is the beginning of the passage that I wanted to focus on today, and just give you some core ideas, a few questions to think about it, and a quote or two to again get your mind around the big picture. But Paul says right after this poem about Jesus in 6 to 11, he says, "Therefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, so now, not only as in my presence, but much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God who works in you, both to will and to work for his good pleasure." Here you can see the connection between Paul and the audience of this letter. Here's where the historical and the literary context are intermingled, and a theological word, in other words, a word for them from God's perspective, is being spoken in a real historical situation. So this is written to real people by a real person, Paul in this case, that we're sort of listening in on the conversation, but we understand it's a conversation that's not to us, but it certainly has significance for us. And that's where we need to go with passages like this. What is the significance of this for us today? How do we take the situation then and what was going on and the same intent and the same purpose, and then put it to work in our world today, which in many ways is very different, has some similarities in principle, but is also very different than what the world of the Philippians, in this case, 2,000 years ago. One of the things to note about this particular section here, and I've pulled it up here as, again, just a Okay, I got a notice about audio, so I just tried to fix that real quick. Let me go back to sharing the screen with you all. So again, just looking at the nature of Jesus, your unities we found in becoming like him and following after his example. And then at the end of the passage here, that talks about the kind of holiness that they will need to have, that they need to live a particular and a distinctive kind of life as lights in the world, blameless and innocent. So sandwiched around this idea about this poem about Jesus is the need for unity and their need for holiness, their need to have both sides of that coin in their lives, and Jesus is the one that makes all the difference in that. So let me go back to my slides here quickly and take you through other ideas here. So as we look at this, some core ideas, that building our lives on the example of Jesus is the responsibility and goal of every believer. This is the direct challenge to us today. That's where our example has to come. We don't compare ourselves with one another or with the world around us or any other standard. Their standard is Jesus, and we look at the nature of that in this poem that he's just written about here. Paul also reflects on the fact that God has rescued us, and we need to put that into practice as rescued people, learning to live wisely in a foolish world. What do we mean by foolishness? People who are attempting to make life work with no place for its creator, as if he doesn't exist or as if he has no interest at all in what happens in the world. That's the problem that humanity has. Doing things our own way, assuming things about God, often creating God after our own image rather than thinking about it the other way around and trying to make the world work that way. That's foolishness. Wisdom says, I need to learn everything I need to know about God and his world from God himself. And that's why I have this story and his word within it and his supreme work in Jesus and his spirit. That's what I need to give myself to. That's where wisdom lies. And that's what we need to do together today, as well as like Paul was challenging them in their time. And this is our service to the Creator and a sign in us that we are indeed part of his plan and his purposes. Again, just looking back at this passage, working out our own salvation with fear and trembling. That's not that something that we do. We're not saving ourselves. We are saved, but we need to think through carefully and work together on what the implications of that are now for our daily lives. Because ultimately, it's not about us. It's not about our church. It's not about anything else. Not a political issue. It takes in everything because it's about God and his rightful reign, his plan and his purposes for his world. So whatever is happening, we need to see it in light of God working in us, and whatever he wants us to conform to in accordance with his word and his plan that we're understanding from the teaching here, that's what we need to do. His will becomes our will, and his work becomes our work, because in the end, that's where true success lies. That's the only thing that's really going to last. Everything else, if it's contributed to Christ in our lives, it will be taken up into it. But if we've been doing our own thing, if we're trying to work things out on our own terms, as the world is, in totally ignorant of God in many ways, that will be forgotten. It will go away. It's vapor, like the writer of Ecclesiastes says. He goes on to say, do all things without grumbling or disputing, that you may be blameless and innocent, children of God without blemish in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world, holding fast to the word of life, so that in the day of Christ I may be proud that I did not run in vain or labor in vain. Paul's wanting a work that lasts, and that work will manifest itself in lives of people who are distinctive from the rest of the world. Not only are they united in Christ, but they're holy. They are set apart. They're unique. They're different. Not in a holier than thou way or not in a superior way, but in a way that reflects the humility of Jesus, that's willing to suffer even to the point of death for the sake of others who need his sacrifice. And so, again, you see how the Jesus poem in 2:6-11 sets the tone for this. But Paul's looking towards the future, and what he's doing now and what they're doing together in their partnership, which again is the purpose of the letter, talking about how they're progressing the work of the gospel together. You see that in chapter 1, that they need to be about that. This forms the core and the center of their lives. So again, some core idea here. Don't be like Israel was, but rather what they should have been, and we can now be in Christ, fully partnering with God. Paul's talking about the fact that, Israel, you see in that story, complaining all the time after that. Oh, we had it better in Egypt. Oh, we had it better there. We had it better there. And that persisted and that continued. And then it manifests itself in all kinds of ungodliness and idol worship, to the extent that, as we're reading now in these days in our Bible reading for the year, God kicked them out of the land and gave them over to the wicked Babylonians, and destroyed the temple, allowed the temple to be destroyed, and people to be taken. Just terrible things that you read about there in Jeremiah, and are reading about in Lamentations right now. We're not to be that way, simply because God has carried the story forward, and now by the work of the Spirit, and with the finished work of Jesus, we can look forward to what God is going to do, and we're fully assured of it because of what Christ has done. So we live in a unique time, unlike Israel. But don't be tempted to go that way. That's Israel was reflecting humanity and what the pagan world was doing by saying, you know what, maybe God really doesn't know what he's doing. maybe we ought to do it this way. You know, we don't know where this guy Moses has end up. Let's build a God. Let's. We think that the God he's leading us under. It looks like this, and they made this idol. You know, no, we need to give ourselves to full partnership with God, and that means we respond to Him, not ask Him to respond to us. In the sense of we're driving things. There's no orientation in the world as it is. We are oriented to God's view of things and then orient others. The light is not in the world. The light is not in us. The light comes from God, and we then reflect that light out into the world. And light here is an orientation thing. Think, you know, yes, the stars are beautiful, but the stars are also the means by which you navigated and oriented yourself. Which way is east, west, north, south? So Paul's talking about that. You are a point of orientation if you're living this kind of life in the world. If you don't, there's no light, there's no orientation, there's no salt, as Jesus talked about as well. Death, or another way of thinking about death, is uncreation. Death is the ultimate form of uncreation, the ultimate form of corruption. It's the ultimate consequence of sin. Awaits the world as it is, but life for those who now live in light of the future that Jesus will bring. Shine as light, hold fast to the word of life. The word of life, as we see here, is a word of the future, a word about what will ultimately be. And that's the hope of it. Paul is setting before them the agenda that new creation that started in Jesus's resurrection will ultimately bring about in the final day when Jesus returns. He goes on to say, even if I am to be poured out as a drink offering upon the sacrificial offering of your faith, I'm glad and rejoice with you all. Likewise, you should also be glad and rejoice with me. Hey, this is something bigger that we're giving ourselves to together, me and you. And it's worth every sacrifice that we make for it. You know, what would it mean for Paul to be proud or to be glad and rejoice on the
Okay, once again, so I had an audio issue, so I'm back again. Sorry about all this. We're making it work. Um, so, not far from closing here. Some of the core ideas in this last set of verses, um, where Paul talks about being poured out as a drink offering. You know, an offering is a giving up of self, giving up of ambition for the sake of others, being offered for others and to others. And so this orientation that we're to be as lights in the world, new lights in an old dark world, is a commitment that comes with a price as it conflicts with the world as it is. It appears like in the letter, the Philippians were beginning to suffer some difficulty for their commitment to Christ. They lived in a colony where Caesar was king, and these were, many of them were families of old soldiers who had colonized this place, and they considered a point of pride that Caesar was their lord back in Rome. And now you have this group of people who have been oriented by Paul to say, no, Jesus is Lord, and our citizenship lies with Him. Our ultimate commitment, loyalty is there, not to anything here on the earth. And that brought about conflict, but that conflict is worth it. And the fruit that it produces in the unity and the holiness of God's people is worth everything that we can give to it. And for leaders like Paul and the missional apostolic type of leaders today, it's what you live for. It's what you want to see: unity and holiness in such a way that points to Jesus as the world's true Lord, and then also orients others to the future that's coming, and that they can be part of it. The reward is not only here and now, in the sense that people are added to the family of God and lives are changed, but that of those with new light take joy in what awaits. And I've mentioned fallow years here. In other words, it's the future hope. It's the future, like the work of a farmer who does all of that work and maybe even lets the land lie dormant for a year with the hope, belief, and confidence that it's going to produce more fruit in the future. But you don't see it right away. It's hard work. It's laborious work. It's work that doesn't produce any results right away. And then there you are left with, do I keep doing this? Am I doing the right thing? Is it, you have to have confidence that is. And this morning I was confronted. I don't know if any of you know who Susan Fry is. Great, wonderful story that I got on the news this morning. I thought, you know what, this seems to fit. She's a farmer in Southern Illinois. Grew up in a farming family, and has a large farm now, I think, in western Indiana, and is just an interesting story that she here with her three brothers in the top there, her husband and their two little boys, started raising and selling pumpkins when she was something like 16 with her mom. Bought her own little pumpkin patch, and then when the family farm was nearly sold under forfeiture or because of debt, bought it herself, negotiated the deal, and is one of the most successful pumpkin and produce and melon growing operations in the United States and maybe anywhere. They call her the Pumpkin Queen, Susan Fry. She's just written a book called The Coming Harvest, which I'm interested to read. But it's about this idea that you work hard each and every day and you do things that don't produce immediate results, but in the end, they will pay off. And this idea of working out your salvation that Paul introduces in this passage, I think is, there's a metaphor for it here. You work hard and it doesn't produce results. It's frustrating sometimes, and storms come, and there's years where you don't plant or do anything. There's times of COVID crisis where it's like everything seems shut down and life is not working and never change. Those are the kinds of the times that we need to be reminded that there's a certain future for us out there, and that Jesus will return and put everything right. And the unity and holiness that we have now is absolutely being built, even in times where it doesn't look like it, or it doesn't look like the fruit is there. It will be. So keep at it. And that's what we're doing as individuals, as families, and together, and we need to on a constant way. Just to leave you with a good quote from N.T. Wright's commentary on this popular commentary, the Everyone series. You can get it. I encourage you to do it. You are, he says, to shine like lights in the world in the middle of a twisted and depraved generation. You are to be the beacon of hope that they need, the sign of God's beauty in a world that had all but defaced it. In a sense, then, what Paul is saying is not just that the Philippians are to be a sign of light and beauty in a world of darkness and ugliness. They are to be a sign of God's new life in a world that only knows the way to death. Very, very important ideas. We have an impact now, and we will have an impact that points towards the ultimate future. That if you want to, again, look at what Paul talks about, the fact that even our bodies will be raised by the power that Jesus has to change everything there at the end of Philippians 3, verses 20 and 21. Very, very powerful ideas. So what would it mean for Paul to be proud on the day of Christ for them? How will we live this out right now? What are the things practically that you see this has implications for in terms of our lives today as individuals, families, and as a family of families that we are? Be ready to discuss these ideas and raise questions and issues or things that you just have really appreciated the Lord's teaching you through this teaching this week. So I hope you take a moment to grab a cup of coffee and reflect on it and gather your thoughts. And we'll look forward to time together tomorrow in our simple churches. So God bless you all, and have a great day. And keep in mind, we'll see what the weather's like in the morning. It's supposed to be a nice day, but we'll see how the weather clears. We'll get word out by 8:30 whether we're meeting in our usual spots outdoors. In the groups that reformed last week, we'll be in the same groups tomorrow and then the following Sunday, the same simple churches. And if not, we'll be indoors in the locations we've been in the back building and wherever needed. Zoom at noon will continue on Sunday, and will for the foreseeable future. So you can always catch this same conversation there. We run it like a simple church online. for about an hour to an hour and a half and do the same things online that we're doing as we're meeting in the live groups in person. So God bless. Have a great day, and all the best to you and your families.